There is a version of you that you have been waiting to become. You know exactly who they are, how they carry themselves, how they speak in rooms, how they make decisions, how they show up, even when nothing is confirming that they should. And every morning, you wake up as the version of yourself that is still waiting for the conditions to be right before you become them, waiting to feel ready, waiting for the evidence, waiting for someone or something outside of you to grant you permission to operate at the level you already know you are capable of. The Stoics had a name for the gap between who you are and who you are waiting to become. They did not call it unreadiness. They did not call it timing. They called it a choice. And Marcus Aurelius, a man who governed the most powerful empire on earth while carrying the weight of plague, war, and betrayal, made that choice every single morning. Not when the conditions were right, not when he felt ready. Every morning, without exception, before the world arrived. Psychologists at Stanford University conducted a study on what they called self-concept discrepancy, the gap between who a person currently believes themselves to be and who they believe they are capable of becoming. The finding was precise and uncomfortable. The larger the gap, the more a person is aware of the distance between their current self and their potential self. The higher their rates of anxiety, avoidance behavior, and what researchers termed chronic performance suppression. In plain language, the more clearly you can see who you are capable of being, and the longer you wait to begin operating from that identity, the more it costs you. Not in the future, right now, in how you speak, in how you decide, in how you carry yourself in the rooms that are already available to you. History confirms this pattern at every level. Every significant figure who built something that lasted, across philosophy, leadership, art, and enterprise, shared one documented characteristic. They began operating from the standard of who they were becoming before they had any evidence that they had arrived there. Abraham Lincoln, a man with almost no formal education, taught himself law from borrowed books and entered every courtroom as if he were already the lawyer he had not yet technically become. Theodore Roosevelt, physically frail, plagued by illness, decided in his early 20s to live as if his body were already the instrument of strength he intended it to become. In both cases, the identity preceded the evidence. The Stoics were not surprised by this. They had built the entire framework around it 2,000 years earlier. Marcus Aurelius did not become the philosopher-emperor history remembers because the circumstances of his reign made it easy. He became that person despite 19 years of circumstances that would have justified becoming someone else entirely. A lesser man, a reactive man, a man who let the weight of the empire and the betrayal of those he trusted reduce him to something smaller than the standard he had set for himself. Every morning, documented in the Meditations, a journal he wrote for no one but himself, he returned to the same practice. He reminded himself, precisely and without sentiment, of who he had decided to be. Not who he felt like that morning, not who the circumstances suggested he was, who he had decided to be. He wrote, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love." He was not writing poetry. He was issuing a daily instruction to the part of himself that would rather remain comfortable, reactive, and small than hold the standard he had already decided upon. He also wrote, and this is the line that cuts through every excuse for why the better version keeps being deferred: waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Not when you feel ready. Not when the evidence arrives. Not when the circumstances improve. Now, Epictetus, who built an entirely free interior from inside the literal captivity of slavery, gave the instruction in its most operational form. First say to yourself what you would be. Then do what you have to do. The sequence is everything. The identity is decided first. The behavior follows from it, not the reverse. You do not wait to feel like the best version of yourself before you act like them. You act like them, consistently, deliberately, without waiting for permission, and the feeling follows the behavior. This is not positive thinking. This is the most precise psychological mechanism the Stoics identified in human development. And it works exactly as described. So why does the waiting persist? Why do capable, self-aware people, People who can describe exactly who they are capable of becoming. Keep deferring the decision to begin operating from that identity. Three mechanisms, running simultaneously beneath the level where most people examine. The first, the identity has been made conditional. Most people have placed an unconscious condition on the decision to become the better version of themselves. When I have the results, then I will carry myself like someone who achieves results. When I have the confidence, then I will speak like someone who is confident. When I have the evidence, then I will act like someone the evidence would confirm. This sequence feels logical. It is completely backwards. The evidence does not produce the identity. The identity produces the evidence. Your brain, specifically your reticular activating system, the mechanism that filters what information you notice and respond to, is calibrated to the identity you hold of yourself. When you hold the identity of someone who is not yet ready, your brain filters out the opportunities, the connections, and the moments that would confirm otherwise. When you hold the identity of someone who is already operating at that level, your brain begins to notice what it previously ignored. The world does not change. Your filter changes, and a changed filter changes everything you see. Marcus did not wait until the empire confirmed he was ready to lead it. He decided he was the kind of man who led empires and governed accordingly. The decision preceded the confirmation. Always. The second, weakness has been mistaken for honesty. There is a story many people carry about the virtue of knowing your limits, of being realistic, of not overstating your capabilities, of waiting until you have genuinely earned the right to operate at a higher standard. This story feels like humility. In most cases, it is not. Real humility, Stoic humility, is the honest assessment of where you are, combined with the complete refusal to use that assessment as a ceiling. Marcus Aurelius knew his limitations with more precision than any critic could have offered. He documented them himself, in the same journal where he documented his daily commitment to transcend them. He did not pretend the weaknesses weren't there. He faced them, and then acted from the standard rather than from the limitation. The difference between honest self-awareness and self-imposed limitation is this. Honest self-awareness says, here is where I am. Self-imposed limitation says, here is where I am, and therefore here is where I will stay until something outside of me changes. The Stoics would look at the second position and call it exactly what it is. A choice dressed as a circumstance. I want you to think about the last room you walked into where you needed to perform. A meeting, an interview, a conversation where something mattered. Now, honestly, which version of yourself walked in? The version that was already decided? Already settled in its own standard? Already operating from the identity of the person capable of this? Or the version that was waiting for the room to confirm it first? Because here is what that room felt. If you walked and decided, if the standard was already set before you crossed the threshold, the room responded to that. Not because of what you said, because of what you were not doing. You were not performing. You were not auditioning. You were not seeking confirmation. You were simply there, already the person, and that absence of need is the most powerful presence any room can feel. If you walked in waiting, if the confidence was contingent on how the room first responded to you, the room felt that too. It always does. Marcus Aurelius walked into the Senate, into the battlefield, into every court and crisis, already decided. Not because he had no fear, not because the outcome was guaranteed, because the decision about who he was had already been made. And that decision was not available for renegotiation based on the temperature of the room. The third, and the one that requires the most honesty to examine. Most people are confusing the practice of becoming with the performance of pretending. They have been told, implicitly, repeatedly, that acting as if you are already the person you are working to become is somehow dishonest. That the authentic version is the one who waits, who stays in the smaller identity until the larger one has been officially confirmed by external results. This is false, and Seneca identified it precisely. As long as you live, keep learning how to live. He was not describing a process that begins after you have arrived. He was describing the permanent condition of every person who takes their own development seriously. You are never the finished article. You are always practicing the standard of the person you are becoming. The athlete does not practice the movements of a lesser version of themselves in hopes that the correct movements will arrive later. They practice the correct form now, deliberately, consistently, imperfectly, until the imperfect practice becomes the natural expression. Acting as if you are the best is not pretending. It is the only honest practice available, because the alternative is practicing the identity of the person who is not yet ready. And what you practice, the Stoics were completely clear on this, is what you become. Your identity is not something you find. It is something you build through repeated action. Choose carefully what you are building. Here is what you actually do. Starting tonight. Practice 1. The morning decision. Tomorrow morning, before the phone, before the news, before any contact with the world outside. Ask yourself one question. How would the decided version of me approach this day? Not the version waiting to feel ready. The version who has already decided. Write the answer down. One sentence. Specific. The decided version of me has the conversation I have been avoiding today. The decided version of me makes the first move on the thing I have been waiting for permission to start. Read it before you leave the room. Then act from it. This is Marcus's practice, made specific to your life, your day, your one decision. Practice 2. Close the identity gap with one action. Identify the single behavior that most clearly separates who you currently act like from who you have decided to become. One behavior, not a plan, not a program. One specific action that, if you took it today, would make your behavior match your stated identity for the first time. Do it before you sleep tonight. Not perfectly, not with full confidence, with the understanding that the practice precedes the feeling every time, without exception. Epictetus built his entire philosophy inside a body that was owned by someone else. He did not wait for the conditions to improve before he practiced the identity of a free man. You have considerably better conditions. Use them. Practice 3. Face one weakness with the Stoic frame. Tonight, write down one weakness. One area where the gap between your current self and your decided self is most visible. Not to shame yourself. To do what Marcus did. Name it, face it, and then attach one specific action that closes the gap by a fraction. Not eliminate it. Addressed. Because the best version of you is not the version with no weaknesses. It is the version that knows its weaknesses precisely and refuses to let them define the ceiling. Practice 4. Raise the standard in one room today. Before this day ends, identify one interaction, one environment, one conversation where you have consistently shown up as the smaller, waiting, contingent version. And show up differently, not dramatically, not with announcement, with the quiet, settled presence of someone who has already decided, who does not need the room's confirmation, who is not performing for the audience, who simply is, already, the standard they have set for themselves. That shift, felt, not announced, is the one that changes rooms. It is the one Marcus carried into every court, every battlefield, every council of men who wanted something from him. Not performed authority, decided authority. There is no substitute for it, and there is no shortcut to it. Only the daily practice of showing up as the person you have already decided to be. You came into this video waiting to feel ready, waiting for the evidence, waiting for something outside of you to grant you permission to operate at the level you already know you are capable of. I want to offer you the only honest assessment available. The permission is not coming, not because you have not earned it, because it was never something that anyone outside of you was authorized to give. Marcus Aurelius governed an empire for 19 years, surrounded by men who doubted him, betrayed him, and waited daily for him to become smaller. He did not need their permission. He had already decided. Every morning, in a private journal, for no one but himself, he wrote the decision into existence, daily, deliberately, until the decision was no longer an effort, but simply who he was. He wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one. Not tomorrow. Not when the conditions are right. Not when you finally feel like the person you have been waiting to become. Now, in the exact conditions you are in. With the exact level of uncertainty that is present in your life today. The version of you that you have been waiting to become is not somewhere ahead of you. It is the decision you make the moment you stop waiting for someone to tell you it is your turn. It has always been your turn. You simply keep choosing to wait for the confirmation instead of being the person who no longer needs it. Stop waiting. Decide. Then do what that person does. Today, in this moment, with everything you already have. That is not motivation. That is the oldest instruction in Stoic philosophy, and it has never stopped being true. Subscribe to the Inner Citadel. This is where the decision gets made, one video at a time, for the people who are done waiting for permission. I'll see you in the next one.